Hello and welcome back to Tomcat Stitchery. I'm Whitney, and in this video, we are doing a sew-along for the Cashmerette Stanton Hoodie expansion pattern. This pattern is a companion pattern to the Cashmerette Stanton Hoodie pattern that is available in their regular collection. You can get that on their website. However, this expansion pattern is only available with their all access tier of their club. However, if you are an all access tiered club member, you get the regular Stanton pattern for free or included as well in that membership. So you definitely want to go take a look. This pattern is meant for advanced beginners, and it is like I said, a companion to the Stanton Hoodie. So this pattern includes a funnel neck option or a dress length option. So you can kind of mix and match the components of the original Stanton Hoodie pattern in order to make the dress or pullover of your dreams. You can put the funnel neck on the regular mid-hip version of the Stanton, as well as you can make the dress version with the hood. For this sew-along, I'll be making the dress version with the funnel neck so you can see the different options that are available. This pattern does come in their full size range from a size 0 to a 32, including all of their cup sizes. For fabric on this, for this version, I am using a French terry. You could also use a sweatshirt fleece or a ponte. You do need a fabric that has at least 15% stretch around the body, as well as you will need some ribbing fabric for the cuffs and bottom bands. You will also need some jersey for the lining of the pocket, and if you are making one of the versions with the hood, you will need that for the lining of the hood as well. In addition, a little bit of interfacing, whether that is for the neckband option of the funnel neck, or again, if you're doing the hood, you may want a little bit of interfacing there for the inside of the grommets. Again, I go over that in the original Stanton Hoodie sew-along if you would like to follow along with the hood instructions. You're also going to need a little bit of interfacing for the front zipper there of the funnel neckline option. This entire project can be sewn on the sewing machine. I am sewing everything on my Bernina 790, which is a loaner machine to me from the University of Sewing. I am using stretch thread, however, you can use regular all-purpose thread for this project. A serger is fine for finishing off your seams should you choose to do that, but it is not necessary, and we'll talk about different seam finishes as well as we get into the sew-along. All right, without further ado, let's head over to the cutting table and take a look at our pattern pieces and the other supplies we are going to need for this sew-along. As always, if you have any questions, leave them down below. Let's start sewing. All right, so let's go through our pattern pieces and supplies that we need to do this Stanton expansion pattern. Now, as a reminder, this expansion pattern includes the option for a funnel neck with a half zip, as well as a dress version, lengthening to make that a dress version. So these can be mixed and matched with the original Stanton pattern. So if you wanted to use the hood on the dress pattern or the funnel collar on the cropped regular Stanton length sweatshirt, you can absolutely do that. For this sew-along, I'm making the dress version with the funnel neck. So just keep that in mind. We'll kind of talk a little bit more about that. All right, so let's talk about the pieces we need. We need piece 1 from the original pattern. This is the pocket piece, and we are cutting this as in view A, because view B is for the zipper up effect. So that is not part of the expansion. The zippered view B on the regular Stanton does not mix and match with either of these. So of this pocket piece 1, we need 1 cut out of fabric on the fold and then 1 cut out of lining on the fold. And the lining, remember, you've not made this yet. The lining, I just filmed the regular Stanton sew-along. The lining, you're actually going to fold along the line for your size. So this is the size 10 that's cut out. So fold along that size 10 line to cut out your lining smaller. So that lining gets cut out is a smaller piece. Okay. But it gets cut on the fold. So on the fold line for view A. And then piece 2. We get 2 of these cut out on the fold. This is the lower front piece, or sorry, 1 of these cut out on the fold. And again, you're cutting on that fold line for view A. Piece 3 is your upper front, and you are cutting one of these out on the fold, also from view A. Piece 4 is your upper back piece. This gets one of these cut out on the fold. Piece 5 is your lower back piece, and we're going to cut one of these out on the fold. Piece 6 is your shoulder yoke piece. You're going to cut two of these out. You do want to make sure that you're marking those dots. The same with your upper back and your upper front. There's going to be matching dots that we need to make sure that we mark on those. This piece can get a little confusing, so make sure you mark your notches really well and mark those dots. On our upper front piece, we will be putting some interfacing there when we get to that point of the pattern for that zipper neck, so stay tuned for that. All right, piece 7 is your sleeve, and you're going to need 2 of those. Piece 8 is your cuff piece, and you're going to need 2 of these. This gets cut out of your ribbing, so we've got 2 of those cut out. Then we are moving on, because I'm doing the dress piece, if you recall. I'm not doing, I think pieces 9 and 10 and maybe 9 and 10 I think are hood pieces. So you only need those if you're doing the hood. And then 11 and 12 I believe are the front band and the back band, the lower band there for the sweatshirt, which we're doing the dress. So we don't need those. So the next picture the next pattern piece that we need is piece 14, which is the skirt front. For that dress variation, if you're going to do the dress. If you're not doing the dress, you just need those pieces for the lower part of the top that come with the regular Stanton. Piece 15 is the skirt back. You need 1 of those cut out on the fold. And then we need all of our little neckband pieces for this funnel neck. Piece 16 is the front neckband, and you need to cut 2 of these out of fabric. If you're using a lighter weight fabric, you can also interface these too. I did not interface these. I'm using a French terry. So I think that this is fine without the interfacing, because we do interface the facing. So I'm good without interfacing, but if you feel like you've got fabric that is a little too floppy, you can absolutely interface these. So you need 2 of those. Piece 17 is your side neckband, and you need 2 of these. Again, also interfacing is optional on those. Piece 18 is your back neckband, and it is, did I call that side neckband? 17 is side neckband. This is back neckband is piece 18. You just need 1 of these cut out, and again, you've got that option for interfacing. And then piece 19 is the neckband facing, and you're going to cut 1 of these out on the fold. And this does get interfacing applied to the back. I've used a regular fusible interfacing that does not have any stretch to it, and that's absolutely fine. We want this to be nice and stable. So 1 of these gets cut out on the fold, and that's piece 19. And then piece 20. So for the dress version, piece 20 here is your dress back band, and you're going to cut 1 of these on the fold out of your ribbing. And then you've got your dress front band, and you're going to cut 1 of these out on the fold in the ribbing. So again, this is for the dress version. Again, if you're doing the regular high hip version, it's got different pattern pieces. I think they are 11 and 12, I think, that get cut out of the regular one. They're a little different. All right, so those are all the pattern pieces that we need cut out. We additionally need a piece of interfacing that is 1.5 inches wide, and there is a chart that we're going to get to in the pattern. For my size, I had to cut it 6 inches long, but there's a chart there, so it does vary a little bit depending on what size you're going to make. But that is going to be interfacing that goes along the back of the upper front piece for the zipper. Again, I will show all of that when we get to the part where we are installing the zipper. Alternatively, we need a stretch needle. I'm using a size 11 Schmetz stretch needle, and we need thread, obviously, and I am using the Seraflex thread from Mettler, so it's got a little bit of give to it, just because we're doing this entire thing on the sewing machine. You can use regular all-purpose thread, but this just gives a little bit more stretch and give and recovery for this project, which is why I'm using that Ceraflex. Then we need a twill tape or ribbon. This is what we're going to stabilize the back of the neck with. So this is what I am using, just this ribbon that I have in my stash. But any kind of 3/8 of an inch wide twill tape works really, really well for that. And then you need a 10-inch, I think this is 10 inches. Yes, over 10 inches. At least a 10-inch zipper. Mine is a little bit longer than that, which is fine. It can be longer, but we need at least, and it needs to be a non-separating zipper. So it's got the stop here at the bottom, so it does not come apart. It's just a regular nylon coil zipper. And you're going to need one of those. And then if you are putting in the, which we are not, but if you are putting the hood on, you will need a little bit, you will need grommets and a little bit of interfacing for that area. And then also drawstring. But again, that is in the regular Stanton sew along if you're interested in following along with that, but we will not be doing that in this one. We are going to do that funnel neck instead. All right, so that is everything we need for the Stanton dress version with the funnel neck. So let's head over to the pressing station and get started sewing. All right, so we are ready to start sewing. We're going to start here with to do our pockets first. So we want to start off with, and we are working from the original Stanton pattern for these first few steps. So you'll have to go back and forth between the instructions for the regular Stanton pattern and the expansion, just so you know. So we're starting off with the pocket piece. We're going to need piece 1, which is 1 cut out of fabric and 1 cut out of lining. And we are going to open up that piece 1 here. Now our regular pocket piece is larger than our lining piece, and that is absolutely fine. That is what it's meant to be. So we are going to put these together, right sides together, like so. So as you can tell, my lining is shorter than my outside, and that's what we want. But we're going to line up our raw edges here on the side, and we're going to match here at the bottom. Those will match. And again, remember, we are doing this entire project can be done on the sewing machine. But you will notice that we have like a little bit of a triangle there that sticks out from the main pocket piece. That's totally fine. And then we're going to pin the other side the same way. So as you can tell, you know, there's a lot of excess there for the main pocket piece. That's absolutely fine. All right, so we are going to sew this seam here at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I am going to use a 3.0 millimeter stitch, and we're going to get both those sides of those sewn. All right, so if you have not worked with knits before, I would highly recommend either a dual feed on your machine or a walking foot. If you don't have the dual feed function on your machine, a walking foot it's going to be invaluable for working with knits. I'm using a straight stitch, like I mentioned. It's a 3.0 millimeter stitch length, and we're just going to sew this seam. And I'm back stitching at the beginning and ending of each of these lines of stitching. And we are sewing at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So there is that seam. We're going to do the same on the other side. Just move that excess fabric out of the way, because again, that main fabric pattern piece is wider. Just like so. All right, let's go back to the pressing station and do some pressing. All right, so we are going to just turn this right side out. And if I've got the lining piece facing me, which is the smaller piece, I'm just lining up. Oh, I did not mark center front and center back on those. Well, we are just lining up those pieces. And we should have 1 inch of the regular pocket piece coming over to the wrong side here at the lining. We're just going to give that a good press. All right, and now we are going to, just to keep things in place while we are sewing, I am going to clip my raw edges here at the top and bottom together. We will base this eventually. Just like so. All right, we're going to flip this over, and from the right side, we are going to sew top stitch 1 inch in from that folded edge at a 4 millimeter stitch length. So let's go do that. Okay, so I'm just matching. This is my pieces right side up here. And I've got my stitch length set to a 4.0 millimeter stitch length. I've got my 1 inch guideline there. I'm gonna have to move that clip. My 1 inch guideline is right here. So I'm matching my fold up to that. We're gonna do that on both sides. All right, let's go back over to the pressing station and get this put on top of the lower front. Okay, so here's our pocket piece so far. I'm actually going to take these clips off really quickly because I want to give it a just a real quick press. Like so. Now we need our piece 2, which is our lower front piece. We've cut one of those out on the fold. And I'm going to open that up. And this has got, sorry, Jersey loves to curl. Let me just press this flat so you can see what I'm talking about. All right, here is our lower front piece. And we are going to be matching our center. Anything that gets cut out on the fold, I always mark the center mark. It just makes life a little easier. So I'm going to mark that. Line those up. And then the folded edges here of our pocket piece line up with the notches here at the top, and then also with the notches that are here at the bottom of our lower front piece. Okay, so that's kind of what those notches there are for. And I'm just going to pop in some pins. Some clips, I guess I should say. And I have put this pocket piece wrong side of the pocket piece to the right side of the lower band. So this is the right side of the pocket piece, and this is the right side of that lower band that's facing up right now. So we're stacking them on top of each other. Okay. Now I'm going to go to the sewing machine. You don't need to see me do this, and I'm just going to base this in place. So I'm going to sew at a 1/4 inch right here along the top and right here along the bottom, because that'll get caught up in the seam allowances eventually. So let me go do that real quick, and then I'll be right back. All right, so I basted that in place at the top and the bottom to keep everything nice and neat. Next, we're still on the regular Stanton instructions. We are going to sew our front together. So we need our piece 3, whether that's A, B, or C, depending on what cup sizes you're using. I'm using 3C here for the GH cup. But we need piece 3, and again, we're cutting one of those out on the fold. And here's that piece right here. Now I have marked this line. Don't worry about this right now. We will go through this. I just went ahead and did it preemptively, but we'll get to this point when we get to the zipper. I also have interfacing here on the back, but again, don't worry. We'll get to that more here in a minute. So I am just going to, here's the bottom of that upper front, and here is the top of the lower front, and we're going to match those two together, right sides together. I am matching my center notch and popping a clip in there. And then we've got our notches here that we can match up. I like to match my notches and raw edges first, and then I'll go back and ease in anything that needs to be eased. So we're going to pin here at the end, and the same on this side. All right, let's go sew this seam. All right, So I've got my stitch length at the straight stitch, the 3.0 millimeter straight stitch, and I'm just going to sew the seam. Okay, so we've sewn that seam. Now, there are some different things that we can do for seam finishes on this pattern. I'm using a serger. If you're using a fabric that doesn't fray, such as the fabric I'm using, you don't have to finish your seam allowances. You can use a zigzag stitch or a faux overlock stitch from your sewing machine if you would like. Whatever your preference is, that's absolutely fine. I'm just using a serger. It's a little bit quicker and easier. But again, you can use whatever seam finish you want. So now you want to go ahead, if you are finishing your seams, finish that seam allowance, and then I'll meet you back over at the pressing table. Okay, so we've got that seam all nice and finished. We're going to open it up, and we want to press that seam allowance up towards the upper front. So let's do that from the wrong side first. And I'm using a tailor's ham here, but you can also roll up a magazine or a newspaper and then wrap it in a towel as well. Press that up. And then from the side. All right. Now, if you would like, you can go and do top stitch, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to top stitch this seam allowance up to this upper front piece, and I'm going to switch to the 4.0 millimeter straight stitch to do that, and I'm going to top stitch at 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to do that, and I will be right back. All right, so there we go. Got my front getting there done. Got the top stitching done, all that jazz. We've got shaping that's built in here to give some beautiful shaping, and it's making it not want to lie flat. That's fine. All right, so next we need our piece 14, which is our skirt front. And we are going to be sewing that now to the bottom. So I'm just going to turn this upside down so that my lower front, this is the bottom of my lower front. If you're doing the sweatshirt version, this is what the band gets sewn to. But we are doing this dress version. And I want to, the side that has the extra notches here on the side is the side that gets sewn to the bottom of this. So I'm just putting this together, right sides together, matching notches. So I'm matching my center notch there. And then we have got notches here on the side that also get matched right here and right here. All right. Okay, I'm going to go back to the sewing machine with my 3.0 millimeter straight stitch, and I'm going to sew this seam now at 3/8 of an inch, and then I'm going to finish that seam, and then I'll meet you back here. Okay, so once that is sewn, we can open this up. And now we want to press this seam allowance down towards that skirt. All right, and now got a little something on there. If you would like to top stitch, if you top stitched up here at the top of your at the upper front, then you're going to want to top stitch down here as well. But we're going to top stitch on the skirt because we're top stitching that seam allowance to the skirt. So you can go back with your 4.0 millimeter straight stitch and top stitch that down. After that, we are finished with our fronts for now, and I'll meet you back here for our backs. All right, so our fronts are done for right now. We've set those aside, and now we're going to work on the back. So we need our piece 4, which is our upper back. We've got one of those cut on the fold. And we need our piece 5, which is our lower back, and we need one of those cut on the fold. So I'm just going to open up this upper back. And this is up, you're looking at this upside down. This is the bottom of the upper back. And I'm going to put the lower back right sides together along this edge. And we are matching notches. That's how you know you've got this lower back turned right way around. You've got a double notch right there that matches up with the double notch there. Okay, now you're going to sew this at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance with your 3.0 straight stitch, and finish that seam allowance, and I'll meet you back here. Okay, so we've sewn that seam, we've finished that seam, and now we can open this up and press that seam up towards our upper back. Okay, now if you are doing the top stitching, now is the time to do that. Switch your machine to the 4.0 millimeter length straight stitch and go ahead and top stitch this seam allowance to the upper back at 1/4 of an inch away from that seam line. So let me go do that, and then we're gonna sew our skirt back on. Okay, so my back is sewn, and I've got that, or my lower back and upper back are sewn together. I've got that line of top stitching there. So now I'm gonna flip this upside down here. Now this is where you would attach the lower band if you were making the regular sweatshirt version, but we are going to be making the dress. So I've got piece 15, which is my skirt back. And we do want to make sure that we've got this right way around. This is the top, because that's my notch. And we are going to match that right sides together. And just like with the front, I am going to sew this at 3/8 of an inch with my 3.0 straight stitch, and then finish that seam. And then I'll meet you back here. All right, so we've got that stitched and serged. So now we're going to open this up, and we're going to press the seam allowance down towards the skirt back. Just like so. Now I'm going to go and top stitch my seam allowance down towards the skirt, and I'm switching back to my 4.0 straight stitch. I'm going to sew that at 1/4 of an inch away from this fold line. And then when I come back, we're going to be assembling our fronts and backs together. All right, now it is time to assemble our bodices. So we need our front again, and we need piece, and our back, we need both, as well as piece 6, which is our shoulder yoke. We need 2 of those. All right, so on our front, and we want to be very careful with what everything is. So this is the front, this gets sewn to the front, this gets sewn to the back, this is my shoulder notch, this is my neck notch. This is all very important to keep track, because this is a weird looking piece, to be able to keep track of all of that. All right, so we are going to take our yoke. I'm going to flip this down right sides together, and this is going to get sewn to this little area here on the front. There's a notch here that we can match up. I'm going to use pins here because we want to be very precise. Because we have our dot that's down here where we want to put a pin through the dot and then put a pin through the dot on the upper front so that those match up perfectly, just like this. All right, now let's go together, and we're going to sew starting at that dot at 3/8 of an inch with our 3 millimeter stitch length to the end here. So let's do that together. Okay, we're going to start sewing right here at the dot. So I'm just going to come over here at 3/8 of an inch, and I'm going to bury my needle. And I am sewing at with a 3 millimeter stitch length, straight stitch. All right, Now we can go finish off this seam allowance, and then we're going to press it towards the bodice. All right, once we've got that yoke piece sewn, we are going to take and we can put a ham under there. And we're going to press that seam towards the upper bodice. You can hit that from the back and the front. Now you can, at this point, you can go and top stitch this down too, if that's what you're doing with your 4.0 millimeter stitch length. I'm going to do that though at the end after I've sewn my back. So now we've got this yoke piece coming up, and we've got our 2 notches here. This is what gets sewn to the back. So I'm putting my back piece right sides together. So this is center back right here. This is this area with the 2 notches that I want to match with this. So I'm going to match those 2 notches. And again, the our dot here helps us keep everything in the correct orientation. So I can stick it through the dot and through the dot on the yoke piece and keep that all nice and even. And then we're matching, you've got like a kind of a weird jog that's up here at the top of center back, and that matches. And then you can put another pin in there if you'd like. All right, so let's now go sew that seam. All right, just like with the front, we're going to start, and I'm gonna plant my needle right there at that dot that's on the pattern. That's at 3/8 of an inch. We have got a 3.0 millimeter stitch length. And now we're going to sew this seam. Keeping those raw edges matched. Okay, and once we've got that sewn, you can finish that seam allowance off and then do the same thing to the other yoke, the other side of the yoke, and then I will meet you back at the pressing table. All right, so we've got our back seam sewn and finished, and now we're going to press that towards the upper back. So we're going to give it a good press from the back, and then flip it over. Got a lot of dress here now. And give it a good press towards the front as well. And just like with the front seam, if you would like to top stitch this, now is the time. I'm going to go and top stitch all of these at this, both my front seam and my back seam now at the 4 millimeter stitch length. So I'm going to go do that, and then when I come back, we're going to work on the funnel neck. All right. So we need, we're going to be working on our waistband, our neckband for that funnel neck now. So I've set the rest of the dress aside for right now. But we are going to need pieces 16, 17, and 18. Again, if you're using really thin fabric, you may want to interface these pieces. I'm not. This is a French terry I'm using. I'm not going to be interfacing. All right, so we have got our piece 16 that have got the notches here on the side. This other side is going to be center front. So what we're going to do is our piece 16 gets matched to our piece 17, and we're matching the single notches. So I'm just going to pin those. Pin one piece 16 to one piece 17, right sides together. And then on the other side, we have got right here. And I'm just going to go over to the sewing machine and sew these with my straight stitch, my 3.0 millimeter straight stitch at 3/8 of an inch. And then I'll be right back. All right, once you've sewn those seams, we are actually going to just press those open. If you were doing top stitching, I will show you where we're going to be top stitching here once we've got the whole thing constructed. All right, so now we've got 2 sides here of our full neckband. So we're going to put these right sides up now. And now we're going to sew our neckband, our back neckband, and we should have one of these. So we've got 2 notches that are here on this piece that match up with the 2 notches on our 2-piece 17s, okay? So that's going to basically be right sides together. So this here. And then this other side of piece 18 gets sewn to this side. All right, now we're going to sew both of those seams with our 3.0 millimeter stitch length at 3/8 of an inch. And then I will be right back. All right, and then just like with the other 2 seams, we're going to press those seams we just sewed open. All right, if you are top stitching, now we have our seams pressed open, so they're not pressed to one side like we have been doing. But if you want that top stitching that you've been doing to match, you are going to want to top stitch 1/4 of an inch away from the seam lines on piece 16, which are these pieces right here. So you're going to sew on piece 16 at 1/4 of an inch away with that 4.0 millimeter stitch length. And then here on the back, you're going to sew on both on piece 18, which is the center back piece. You're going to sew at 1/4 of an inch with that same 4.0 millimeter stitch length to top stitch right through here. And I am going to do that here in just a second. But before we move on, we want to take our piece 19, which is our neckband facing, and we want to make sure that those match. And mine look really good. The instructions say if they don't, you can trim up a little bit just to make sure that those pieces match. Mine look really good, and mine do match. So that's what we're going to be checking. All right, I'm going to go top stitch, and then I will be back here for our next step. Okay, now it is time to attach our neckband. So there's a few things that we need to do to our upper front piece here. That is, we want to make a line that is perpendicular to our grain line, but it should be going right down that center. You know, we cut this on the fold. It should be going right down that center line. There is a chart on the pattern that tells you how long this line should be. I'm making the size 10, so my line is 5 inches long. So we're making a straight line 5 inches long on the right side, and then we're ending it with a 1/2 inch little T mark right there, okay? I went ahead and did mine on both the front and the back, and the reason I did it on the back is because on our back side, we want to attach interfacing. Now, if it disappears on the back side, that's fine. We will be working from the front side on this, so we just really need that to show up on the front. I'm using a pen that goes away with heat, so I did mine on both. And we want the strip here to be 1.5 inches wide and then 1 inch longer than the line we drew on here. So my line on the front was 5 inches for my size. This piece is 6 inches long by 1.5 inches wide. And I have ironed it down. I went ahead and marked it on the back so I could easily center my interfacing over it. Then I ironed it, and then I just redrew it on the front. So that is what we want. A nice 1.5 inch wide by the length that it says on the pattern chart plus 1 inch. And that chart is in the instructions at this point. Okay, so that is the prepping that we needed to do to this top, this upper bodice piece. All right, so now what we are going to do is we're going to sew we're not cutting anything yet. I mean, we will be cutting down into this line, but we're not doing that yet. We're going to be sewing our neck band to the top of our to our neckline. So we're going to be matching this raw edge. This is that piece 16 here, that raw edge right to that line that we drew. And then our seams should all meet up real nicely. And our notches should all line up real nicely as well. Oh, I am doing this upside down. Okay, this is important. Let me show you this. When we are looking at our neckband piece, when it's laid flat, we have a longer side and a shorter side. The longer side is what is getting sewn to the neckline of this shirt. Not the shorter side is what's going to be up by your face. So we are sewing this longer side, and it does have notches down here on this longer side that are going to match up. Not the case up here. The only notch we have up here is just center back. So I just about pinned it that way. So I just wanted to make that known. All right, let's try this again. Okay, so it feels counterintuitive because it's curving away from where we're going to be sewing it to. All right, so matching up the raw edge of P16 to that line we've drawn. And then our seams, we'll have to ease this in a little bit because it's a concave being sewn into a convex curve. And then we've got our notch right there. And then this next seam. And then the center back notch. All right, here in the front, this will eventually get cut, but not yet. We just want those two raw edges, so it's center front, to butt up to next to one another so that they are just right there, butted up, but we don't want them overlapped because we will be cutting this here in just a minute for our zipper. All right. All right, let's go to the machine together and we're going to sew this on. All right, so I've turned my garment inside out, kind of. I mean, we don't have the side seams done on this, so it's not, just flopping it over. Because I want I want it the opposite way. Never mind. I want this right side. I would like my neckband to be against the feed dogs, not my neckline. Because of the way of the curves, so my neck... my bodice is what is facing up here. I'm just going to unclip that. We are sewing this at 3/8 of an inch. Oh, come on, get through there. 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I'm using my 3.0 millimeter long straight stitch. And we're just starting at center front on one side, making sure that those seam allowances are staying open or staying the side that they're supposed to be meant to go, and that our raw edges are also staying matched up. Okay, and look, that did move. That kind of bunched up a little bit on me. I feel good with this side is pretty much lined up to that line, but I need to move this over. So I'm going to unpick that from about here till about here and just re-stretch that so it, or reset that a little bit to where it does butt up. So I'm going to re-sew that really quickly, and then I'll meet you at the pressing station to start our zipper installation. All right, so our neckband is all sewn. I still have it down with that seam allowance up at the moment. I fixed that front, so now we butt up there at that line. All right, now we're going to put our zipper in, And this is a very interesting way that they do the zipper. I think it's really cool. So we've got our line here. We still haven't cut anything. So we're going to take our zipper that's at least 10 inches long, and we're going to put it right side down. So there's my zipper pull is facing down. And we're going to line up the stopper of our zipper with this line right here. Like right at that line. Or right underneath it, I guess. And then we are going to sew a 1/2 inch across this tape. So our zipper is going down towards the hem. It is face down. And if you want to go ahead and mark with like chalk, like a 1/2 inch line, you know, a 1/4 inch on either side of the stop so that you can see that really well. I mean, we've got that marked here, but just so you can see that really well, that's absolutely fine. But let's go over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew this down. All right, so I have put my zipper foot on and I've moved my needle all the way to the left, okay? And I am taking my stitch length way down. We want a nice short stitch length. So like, I don't know, a 1.5 is probably good. Now keep in mind, this is gonna be impossible to unpick because we're working on a knit fabric. Try and get everything under here. So make sure that this is flat, that you do not have anything under here that you do not mean to sew, because this is going to be a real pain in the rear end to unpick. All right, so again, we are lining up. So my zipper is face down. This is the top neck edge. This is the hem that way. So my pull is headed towards my hem. I have marked a 1/2 inch line here right below that stop. I am putting that stop right below that line that I made. Now I'm just going to plant my needle. All right. And we just want to make sure, and you can go like super slow on this so that you don't hit. We want to backstitch at each end. And actually, I may hand crank this. I just don't want to accidentally hit that metal stop with my needle. All right, and then one more, we are going to backstitch again. All right. So we have sewn at a nice short stitch length right there across the bottom, and we want to make sure that we have backstitched at either end of that line. All right, let's go back to the cutting table, or back to the pressing station. All right, so we've got this really weird looking thing, right? Like we've got this line, our zipper is pointing the wrong way. It looks really, really weird. So our next step is we're gonna cut right along that line, but we're gonna stop about 5/8 of an inch away from the bottom, and then cut from that point to our stitch line on each side to create like a little triangle there at the bottom. So let's do that. Again, we want to pull our sides away. We don't want to accidentally cut something we don't mean to cut. So you should be cutting right in between where those edges butted up for your neck. And then I'm just going to cut down this. And when I get about, I don't know, 5/8 of an inch away from my stitch line there, I'm just going to, here, let me zoom in so you can see what I'm doing. I'm just going to cut from that line to the end of my stitching line here. And then the same on this other side. So we've got like a little triangle that's there. All right. Now we can pull this zipper up. And when we do, it's going to tuck this bottom under, which is what we want. And now we're going to sew our sides to our zipper. Again, I think this is such a smart way to do this. But before we do that, I want to go around my neckline and press this seam that we sewed. I want to press that up towards the neckline piece. Got a lot of fabric we're messing around with here. So I'm just going to press that neck seam now up towards the neckband. Which will become important here in a later step. All right, so now when we look at this, let's just take a look at what we've got going on here. With our zipper up, we want these sides, if you tuck that under, are going to get sewn to either side of our zipper. Be 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, so that our finished zipper looks something like that, give or take. All right, so that's our end goal. So we just want to make sure that it looks good here at the bottom. We will be checking that again before we go any further. Now, there's a couple of ways that we can do this zipper to keep things in place. I'm not a huge fan of pinning my zipper in place. I just feel like it warps the zipper tape. I much prefer a product like a Wonder Under or a Wonder Tape. Sorry, not Wonder Under, Wonder Tape, or something along those lines. I've got this Fusey Web here that's a little bit different. The Wonder Tape is nice because you just finger press it down. This has to be attached with a iron, but I think it just makes life so much easier. So I am just going to take this glue and I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to be able to cut a lot of this zipper off. I just want a roundabout how far, about up to there. No sense in wasting the product. All right, so I'm just very carefully going to iron this in place without touching my iron to my nylon zipper teeth. All right, so we'll let that cool just a minute. Okay, so what we are going to be doing now, well, that's cooling because that's paper that's now on there, is we want to, let's get this all orientated correctly, basically fold this raw edge over-ish. We're going to be matching our raw cut edge to the edge of the zipper, so don't worry about it being like perfectly, but just kind of get that orientation, and we're going to pick the side. So we're going to be working on the right side of the zipper when worn. So if you kind of tuck that in a little bit, you can kind of see where that's going. Now we are just going to flip that. And I'm going to flip all of that over here so that now our zipper is going to be right sides together with that raw edge of one of the sides of our, pull that paper off. But hopefully you can kind of see the orientation there. And again, we want to make sure that the, just move all that out of the way. So I'm trying to make it as nice and flat here at that bottom edge where we cut that, triangle out. And we want to make sure that that seam allowance is pressed up towards that neck edge. All right, just like that. You can put pins in there if you'd like. I just find this much easier. All right, let's go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew this down. All right, so I still have my zipper foot on, and I'm going to be sewing at right along, I'm running my zipper foot right along the edge. You can feel the zipper teeth that are there. And I've got my needle way over to the left. What else? Okay, the instructions ask you to base this in place, which is a great idea if you've never done this before, just to make sure everything looks fine, because this can be a pain to unpick. If you are sewing this in for final though, take your stitch to a 2.5, and you want to back stitch at the front or at each end of your stitch. So I'm just running that zipper foot right along those teeth. And then I'm gonna back stitch here at the top. Just like so. All right, now we're gonna go back and we are going to mark where our seam line is here for this neckline. Another thing to note, if you're worried about raveling, you can totally finish off this seam allowance if you want. If you want to do a zigzag stitch or something like that, serger is probably not going to work because you're not going to be able to get close enough to the teeth there with a serger. But if you do want to finish that off with like a faux overlock or a zigzag, you can. I'm not going to worry about it. You can also, because the edge of the zipper tape is finished, you can also just kind of trim your fabric away, because once this is down and top stitched, it will be just that zipper tape that's going to be shown on the inside. So completely up to you what you want to do there. All right, before we sew the other side in, let's take a look here. And I'm just going to lay this down. So this is the wrong side of my zipper that is facing up. And I've got my seam line that's right here for my neckband versus the top of the front. And I'm just going to mark where that is, because if you watched the other sew along of the Stanton with the zippered version, we want that to match. So when this is zipped up, that seam matches across the front. So that's going to be an important guideline right there. And I kind of went up on that, didn't I? Let me get a straight edge. If my line is angled, that's going to do me no good. And this is just chalk that I'm using. There we go. All right, so now we can flip this again, right side over. You can kind of see how well you did there at your little corner. And I think that that's looking pretty good, at least on the side that I sewed. All right, so now we can take off our glue or our paper on that other side. So this is what things look like at the moment. We've got one side sewn in, not the other. So now we're going to take this side and we're going to flip this over so that we've got right sides facing on this other side. And I want to match up that chalk line with that seam of that neck edge on the other side. Let's turn this around a little bit here. So that is actually what I want to kind of pin in place first. Is that, or not pin, but glue in place, is that chalk edge is matching right at that seam where the neckband and the front connect. So we can hit, I didn't have enough glue to go all the way to the top on this, but we just need it close. Really just this intersection is the important spot. So then we can come down here press that glued side in. Just like so. Okay? So now we are going to go back to the sewing machine and we are going to sew this other side in. All right, so again, it's probably not a bad idea to baste if you are, if you are worried about things not lining up. So using a longer stitch length. If you are sewing this in though for real, you need like a 2.5 millimeter stitch length. All right, so I'm starting at the top this time. Again, my foot is running right along the edge of those teeth. And then when when we get to this seam, we want to make sure that that neck edge seam is going up into the neckband. And then when we get down here to the bottom, careful not to catch any pinches. And we're going to back stitch there as well. All right, just like so. All right, now we are going to go back to the pressing station and check everything and make sure everything looks good. And if you did baste, this is the time that we're going to check everything to see if you need to do any unpicking or if you're good to go back and sew your lines of stitching in with the final stitch. All right. So now we've got everything right sides out, checking to make sure that we like the placement of that. We want to make sure that our seam here at the neck band to the front are matching across the zipper. Those look fantastic. I'm very happy with the way all of this looks. So now we can very gently press that away from the zipper. Try not to hit the zipper with your iron because, again, if you're using nylon coil like I am, those can melt. You want to be careful. And then from the wrong side, if we want to take a minute, this is going to get top stitched down. Well, it's optional, but I will be top stitching mine down. But when we're looking at this from the wrong side, if you want this cleaned up just a little bit, again, like I mentioned, you can, once you've checked to make sure everything looks good, peel away my glue. This glue does wash out that I've used, but you can go in and just trim the body of the fabric a little bit so that that zipper tape completely covers it. So if you want to go, doesn't need it a ton, but just a little. So see now, once that is like pressed down really nicely, that's going to hide that edge. Now I still have my interfacing that's out, but I'm not as worried about that. We can do the same on this side. All right, just like so. So when that gets top stitched, that'll be nice and finished off. So that's just a little something that you may want to do depending on how things turned out. But if you're all happy with the way that this looks, then fantastic. You are set and ready to go. If you need to unpick and resew a few things, that's fine as well. All right, we're going to set this aside for just a minute and we're going to work on our neckband facing. All right, so we need our piece 19, which is our neckband facing. This does need to be interfaced on the back, so no matter what your fabric looks like, I would absolutely interface this piece because we want that collar to be able to stand up nicely. Now, we are going to be finishing off this edge with that twill tape. So I have gone ahead and marked in my seam allowance. This is 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. The pattern calls for twill tape that's at least, that's 3/8 of an inch wide. So mine is more 1/2 inch. So because of that, I marked in this 3/8. But the reason I marked this in is that we want this twill tape to extend past the cut edge of our facing by about at least a 1/16 of an inch. So I've marked this in. It's going to make it really easy for me to then go and sew this in place, and we'll do that together. And then when we flip it over after it's been sewn into place, we're going to have a little bit of that twill tape or ribbon going over the edge, which is what we want. So let's go to the sewing machine and let's sew our twill tape to the bottom of our neckband, or our neckband facing. Okay, using our 3mm straight stitch, I am going to line up the edge of my tape with that line that I drew in, and I am sewing about a 1/16 of an inch away from the edge of that ribbon. And I'm just going to go little by little. And I'm just, as I'm going little by little, lining up that cut, or that raw edge, or not raw, finished edge of that tape to that line that I drew. And then we'll back stitch at the end of that. And like I said, this is going to extend past that edge of that seam, which is what we want, okay? Because that's going to get caught and finish off our seams really, really nicely once this gets sewn into place, okay? So that twill tape should extend a 1/16 of an inch at least past the bottom there. So I'm going to go and trim these flush here, and then I will meet you back at the pressing table, and we're going to pin this to our neckband. All right, so I have used a zipper that is longer than what I needed, which is fine. That's absolutely fine. But it's at this point that you want to unzip that zipper, because you do not want to accidentally cut off the top of the zipper with the pull above where you're cutting. Not that I would know anything about that. But go ahead and unzip it, and it can stay unzipped now for the next few steps. And then we need our facing that's here. So what we're going to do is we are going, now that we've unzipped this, we're going to open this up. So now our zipper is, we're looking at the wrong side of our zipper here. And we are going to place our facing right sides together, matching it up with the raw edge of that zipper. We will sew this down in a later step, the next step actually, but we're going to do around the neck edge first. So I'm just going to put a clip there. And then I think our only matching point we've got with the top of the neck facing here is the center back. So I've got the front done, and then I'm going to match center back, which is right there. And then back around to this other front. Again, you know, the zipper is going to be worn this way, but we are opening it up. And then matching those, like so. Now we can go back and pop some pins or clips in, maybe at those seam allowances on the outer neckband area, so that we can make sure that those stay open when we sew them. And I will trim my zipper tape after we've done this step. All right, now we're going to go back to the machine, and we're going to sew around the top of this neck edge. So let's go do that. All right, so I've got this where my facing is up and my the outer neckband is down to against the feed dogs. And we're gonna very carefully, I've got my 3mm straight stitch on for this. And you may want to just carefully go over the zipper teeth with cranking your hand wheel, just so you don't break a needle. Typically the nylon zippers are okay. All right, now we are just matching raw edges, going slowly, making sure that nothing's getting pinched under there. Sewing at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then here at the end, you may want to crank that hand wheel again, get over those teeth, and then backstitch. All right. You can check to make sure nothing got pinched on the back side. We are good. Let's go back to the pressing station. All right, once we've got this sewn across that top seam, we can now trim off our zipper tape. I just trim it flush with that seam. Don't use good scissors. These are my zipper cutting scissors. So don't use good ones. Nothing will dull scissors quicker than cutting through zipper. All right. Again, making sure that that is unzipped so you don't accidentally cut something off that you didn't mean to. All right, now we are going to sew the facing down to that zipper tape. So we are sandwiching the zipper between the facing and the upper collar that's there. We want to make sure that our seam allowances, that this seam allowance is up, that's here in the back, that it's going up towards that neckband. And then here on this side, it is going down, which it should. I mean, there's not really a seam allowance there. We've just sewn that twill tape. But you want to make sure that that twill tape is beyond that seam line at least 1/4 of an inch. And we can pop some pins in there. And we're going to do this on either side. And now we're going to put our zipper foot back on, and we're going to sew along that previous stitch line when we were sewing our zipper tape to the outside. So let's go back to the machine and sew that down. Okay, so I've put my zipper foot back on my machine. I've got my needle all the way to the left, and I am going to backstitch at the front of this seam. I've got my 3mm straight stitch on, and I am just sewing right along that previous stitch line. And I do want to make sure that that's seam allowance is going up towards the neckband. And we're going to backstitch. So just like so. And I'm going to do that on the other side, and then I'll meet you back at the pressing station. All right, so we want to trim our corners up here at the top. I'm using my zipper teeth scissors because you'll be cutting through a little bit of those zipper teeth. And I don't want anything to get dulled. And then once we've done that, we can take our facing and turn it towards the right side and kind of poke those corners out. Just like so. All right, our next step is going to be to understitch our facing, our seam allowance to our facing. Hold on, I got a rogue thread there. And a rogue thread there. So now, so our facing is, well, this is all inside out. Here we go. We want our facing to sit nice and neat on the inside of our collar edge, but we're going to understitch that. And what understitching is we're going to kind of turn that right back out, right side out again. We are going to be sewing about 1/16 of an inch on the facing side, and we are sewing that seam allowance that we just sewed to the facing. So we are going to go back to the machine, and we are going to understitch that seam there at the top of where the neckband attaches to the neckband facing. All right, so we're not going to be able to start this right at the corner. We just can't get in there, and that's fine. I'm just going to slide this under. You just want to get it in there as close as you can to center front, but without like accidentally sewing a pinch into something that you didn't mean to sew into. So just as well as you can. Well, and that's not wanting to lie flat at all, so. And I'm sewing on the facing side, and that seam allowance there is all going towards the facing. Oh, and I've got my regular foot back on that I need to change that for, and I'm using my 3.0 millimeter stitch length. And we're just gonna back stitch, and then again, we're sewing about, I don't know, a 1/16, an 1/8-ish of an inch away from that fold line. And as I go, I'm kind of lightly pulling those seams away from each other, making sure that that seam allowance is going towards the facing. And again, just go as far into that corner as you can get. It's not going to be very far that you're going to be able to get, and that's okay. Because when we turn this right side out, you can see, you know, there's like an inch there that I wasn't able to understitch. That's okay. And even more on this other side. But again, that's okay. All right, let's go back to the pressing station and get this all nice and pressed. All right, so our neck edge is coming along quite nicely. You can kind of finger press that into place and kind of see where we're going with this. The first thing we want to do before we do any pinning here is let's just give that neck edge a good press, the seam we just understitched. That understitching helps to pull the right side fabric around to the wrong side so that you have a really clean edge from the right side. I love understitching. It feels like magic. All right. Our next step is we're going to pin this facing in place because we're going to do a stitch in the ditch situation here. So we're going to be pinning our facing and our outer edge together around this seam where we connected the neckband to the top of the Stanton. So I'm just going to go around and I'm going to put a pin right into that seam. Get things all oriented correctly here. This neck edge is not like terribly large, so sometimes getting around it can be a little difficult. But just put everything nice and flat, and then we're just going to pop a pin, and we'll check our pins before we actually go sew to make sure that everything is lying as it should, or laying as it should, I guess I should say. But we want that seam allowance where we sewed the neckband to the upper front and upper back. We want that seam allowance going up into the neckband. And then our facing, bottom of our facing, will be heading down with that twill tape. Oops. Sometimes I accidentally pin to my ham. Not what we want to do. Okay, so once we've pinned along that seam, we can now look at the inside here and just make sure that we've got everything caught nice and neat. And that's all looking pretty good to me. Maybe that could adjust where you need to. You could also hand base this in place if you wanted to. That is an option. All right, so we're just going to check on the inside here. That looks all pretty good. So let's now go to the machine and we're going to stitch in the ditch. All right, so I'm going to turn this kind of inside out because I want the top side of my jacket up. Like so. All right, we're going to stitch in the ditch, and what that means is that we are literally stitching right along that seam line there. We want to err on the side of the left here because when you think about it, the seam allowances under here are pressed up towards the neck edge, so it carries a little bit of a bump. So we want to err on the side of not the bump. So I'm going to try and stitch right in between that seam, and we'll kind of pull things apart as we go. I've got my straight stitch on, but it is my 4.0 millimeter stitch length. Oops, I'm throwing things on the floor. I'm just going to plant my needle right there at that seam. And just go nice and slowly. And I'm kind of pulling that seam apart as I go, making sure that everything underneath feels like it is nice and flat, that I'm not sewing on something I don't intend to sew. Take your time, flip the garment as you go to make sure everything is laying as flat and as straight as possible. All right. So stitching in the ditch, it makes it kind of pretty much invisible from the right-hand side. Okay. So now we're going to do some top stitching. I want to make sure that my threads are not in the way of that zipper. All right, so we're going to do a couple passes. We are going to top stitch, and it's completely optional if you want to top stitch along the zipper opening. I'm going to do that. I think it looks nice, and it keeps everything nice and secure. And then we are going to do a top stitch that we do want visible right along the bottom edge here on the body, so about 1/4 of an inch away from this seam line. And we are using our 4.0 millimeter stitch length. So let's first, I'm going to do the zipper opening. And one thing that's good to check is just to make sure that your zipper zips up easily, that you don't have any, sometimes we get a stray thread or something in the way and then it won't zip. And we are good. So we should be good to do our top stitching. Okay. So I'm just going to start at the top here, and I'm just going to kind of gently pull that the zipper teeth out and away. And we are going to be sewing at 1/4 of an inch from the fold there. So not from the zipper teeth, but from the fold. And again, I am using a 4 millimeter stitch length. When I get down here near my pole, I'm going to keep my needle down. We're going to zip this up a little bit. There we go. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to raise that presser foot, move that zipper pull out of the way. And then backstitch. All right, that all looks good. So now I'm going to top stitch the 1/4 of an inch down on the body here away from that seam where the neckband gets attached. And I am back stitching at the front and the end there. All right, and now we've got all of that top stitching done. There down the zipper and around the neck edge. Let's go back to the pressing table and take a look. Okay, so we've got our zip neckline all done. And now it is time to give it a really good press. Some of that presses right out. Give that a really good press. I'm dripping water everywhere. And then we're going to be sewing our sleeve on. So go ahead and give that a good press, and then I'll come back here to attach our sleeve. All right, so we need our front and back neckline in piece that we've been working with. And we need piece 7, which are our sleeves. So that is our next step, is we're going to pop these sleeves in, and this is called putting our sleeves in flat. Flat because we don't have a side seam sewn up, so our sleeve is going to stay flat, and we will sew up the side seam and the underarm seam of the sleeve in the next step. All right, so when we open up the side of our shirt, you will notice we have a notch here on our yoke. We've got one notch here on the front armscye and a double notch here on the back armscye. So we want to match those to our sleeve, which is this one. And this is we're putting this right sides together. So I'm going to lay my sleeve right side down, and you will notice when you are doing this that your sleeve is going the opposite way of your armscye, but that's okay. That's what we want. So I'm going to match up the top notch there at my sleeve head there and pop a clip in or a pin. And then I'm going to match my single notch over here to the front to that single notch. And then matching my underarm and my side seam up here. Like that. And then on the other side, we're going to be matching our double notches, which is the back of the sleeve with the back of the garment. And then our underarm sleeve with our underarm of the side seam there. All right, and now we can go back in between these, and you'll see you've got a little bit of excess there. You can kind of knit fabric's nice because it kind of stretches and allows you to ease in that sleeve cap ease a little. All right, now we are ready to go to the machine and sew this in place. So let's go do that. All right, so I am going to be sewing this in place, and I'm sewing with the sleeve down. I've got my 3.0 millimeter stitch length, the straight stitch on. And again, we're sewing this at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And I'm just matching up those raw edges as we go. And I like to stick my hand in between the two layers just to make sure we are not sewing any pinches in as we go. All right, now we just want to flip this over, make sure we didn't catch any pinches. We didn't. Our sleeve is now put in. So now you can leave your seam allowance. You can finish it off. I'm going to serge mine. So however you're finishing off your seam allowances, go ahead and do that. And then go ahead and sew in the second sleeve. And then I will meet you back over at the pressing station. Okay, so we got a lot of fabric happening here. We've got that sleeve in. And it's all finished and everything else. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do our side seam. So if we lay our whole thing together, right sides together, we start to see it looking like a dress or sweatshirt, depending on what you're making. So we're going to start, and we want those seam allowances going towards the sleeve. And I'm going to start by putting a clip here at that underarm seam. And then we can come down here and match the end of our sleeve, right sides together. Maybe one more in the middle. Then here on the side seam, this is the GH cup. It's got a very exaggerated curve here on the side seam. We are matching up the notch that's there at the bust. And then we are matching up our seams. We want all those seams to go really beautifully from front to back. And then here on the skirt edge, we've got a notch that we can match. All right, now we are just going to go to the machine and we're going to start, I'll probably start my hem and sew all the way up. Then we're going to hit the underarm seam and keep going, sewing all the way to the end of the arm. I'm going to go ahead and do that at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance with my 3.0 millimeter stitch, straight stitch. And then I'm going to finish off that seam allowance. And I'm going to do that on both sides and then come back. Okay, you should have what is looking like a sweatshirt and or dress, depending on what version you are making. Your side seams are all done up. So now, before we move on to our cuffs and then our hem bands, we want to press these seam allowances towards the back. So let's give those, that's my back. Let's give these a really good press towards the back. I'm using a seam roll, but you can use a rolled up newspaper or magazine, wrapped up in a towel if you'd like. All right, you're going to do that to both sides, and then we need to set it aside. And you need your piece 8, which is your cuff piece, and you should have 2 of these. So we are now going to sew our cuffs. So what we're going to do is you should have notches here on these, it's kind of a square, but they're actually these edges here, the edges with the notches. And we're going to put these right sides together, matching up those notches. Pop in some pins and or clips. Same with this one, matching up those little notches. And then we are going to go to the machine and we're going to sew this seam, but we are going to use the zigzag stitch for this. So we are going to use a zigzag stitch with a 2.5 millimeter length and a 0.5 width. So I'm going to go sew that seam real quick and then on both of these, and then I'll be right back. All right, so I've sewn that seam, and again, it's with a 2.5 or a zigzag stitch with a 2.5 millimeter length and a 0.5 width, which gives it some of that stretch. But now we want to take our cuffs, and again, if you've got a seam roll like I've got, or a makeshift seam roll if you're using something, we want to press this seam allowance open. All right, now we're going to take these and we're going to match these wrong sides together. So I'm going to fold this up wrong sides together. Fold that over to make our cuff. Stretch it and get it. Want those raw edges nice and matched up. Then give it a little press there. We're going to do that with both cuffs. If you would like, you can take this over to your sewing machine and baste these two edges together with that. Make sure you're using that zigzag stitch, that 2.5 millimeter length, 0.5 width zigzag stitch. You can do that if you'd like. This ribbing really stays together really nicely, so I don't feel like I need to. But go ahead and do this to the second one, and then we'll come back here and attach our cuff to our sleeve. All right, once we've got our cuff ready to be attached, we're going to take one of our sleeves, and it is right side out. And I'm just going to take my cuff, here's my folded edge, slide it over that sleeve. And we're going to match up our seam allowances there, the underarm seam allowance with this cuff seam. And either pop a pin in or clip. And then your sleeve edge is going to be bigger than your ribbing because we're going to actually stretch that ribbing to fit our sleeve. So if you just kind of give it a tug, then you can pop a couple of pins or clips in there, just matching up all three of those raw edges. So you'll have two raw edges on the cuff and then the raw edge of the bottom of the sleeve. Like so. All right, now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we are going to sew these in. All right, so now we're going to sew these in. Again, I've got my machine on zigzag stitch with a 2.5 millimeter length and a 0.5 width. And I'm sewing with the sleeve up and the cuff against the feed dogs because my sleeve fabric likes to curl. So I want to keep an eye on it. And I'm sewing at 3/8 of an inch. You're going to want to stretch that ribbing as you go. Back stitch at the beginning and the end. All right, now if you'd like, you can go finish off this seam allowance, which I'm going to do, and then do the same thing to the other sleeve, and I'll meet you back at the pressing station. Okay, this is what our finished attached cuffs look like. Then when you flip them down, you've got a really lovely cuff. We can press those seam allowances up towards the sleeve, which is where they want to go naturally, but go ahead and press those up towards the sleeve on either side, and then we just need to attach the bottom band. So go ahead and press those, and I'll meet you right back here. Okay, so our final step here is we need our bottom bands here, our dress front band and our dress back band, just like so. And we're going to be attaching this to the bottom of our dress. And this gets done pretty much the same way as our cuffs got done. So what we're going to do, this is piece 20 and piece 21. I'm actually going to take a pin and I'm going to mark just which one is my back. Just makes it easier. I don't know that it matters really, but it makes it a little easier when we're putting it onto the dress. So that's how I know that this is the back band. So I'm going to open this out and then right sides together, I'm going to put the front band down, matching up these notches at the side. We're sewing this into one big tube. Okay, I'm going to go to the sewing machine and sewing with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to use that zigzag stitch, that 2.5 millimeter length with a 0.5 width, and I'm going to sew both of these side seams. And then I'll meet you back here. All right, so we've sewn the front band to the back band together at both of the side seams. And now we can come in here and press those seams open. And then just like with the cuffs, we are going to take and fold these in half wrong sides together. So we're going to match those side seams. And then I marked a center front, no, this is center back notch. I can tell this is back because I've got that pin I popped in there. The other side seam. Whenever I cut anything out on the fold, I always mark the center of that piece. It always comes in handy. And then this center mark. All right, and now we can just kind of put those raw edges together and give this a good press here at this bottom fold. You can then, once we have pressed this, if you want, you can go and baste the top of this together with that same zigzag stitch, that 2.5 length with the 0.5 width, to keep your layers together if you'd like. Again, my ribbing is being very cooperative, so I don't need to do that. But if your fabric is curling on you really badly, you can definitely do that. I'm going to be careful ironing this because that is a plastic head on that pin and it will melt. All right, once we have got our, got a very long thread here. Once we've got this all pressed, we're now going to sew it to the bottom of our dress. So I've got the bottom edge of my dress right here. Now this fabric does like to curl. And this is the back that I've got up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to match, where's my back? There's my back. Just like with the cuff, I'm going to slide this over my dress and I'm going to match center back with this center back notch. I can pull this pin out now because I don't need it. And then my side seam here, match that. Just like with the cuff, our bottom band is going to be a little smaller than the bottom of our dress. So we're going to have to stretch it in order for it to fit. So by marking these 4 spots, we're basically quartering it to make sure that as we're stretching, it's being done evenly. All right. So now that that band is pinned to the bottom edge of the dress, I'm going to go back to the machine just like with the cuffs, and I'm going to sew at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance with that 2.5 length, 0.5 width zigzag, and then sew that seam and then finish it off, and I'll meet you back here. Okay, so we've sewn that to the bottom. We have finished off our seam allowance. Now we can fold that down. And we can press that seam allowance up towards the skirt of the dress. Just like so. And there we have got our Stanton expansion funnel neck dress is all sewn and ready to be worn. As always, if you have any questions, please leave them down below. I'm happy to answer any of those, and happy sewing. And there we have it, our finished Stanton expansion dress. We've got our funnel neck again that can be put onto the regular body of the Stanton, or and we've made this in the dress length, and we can also take the regular Stanton and make it into a dress as well. So whether you're wanting to put a funnel neck on it or a hood, make it a regular mid-hip version or a dress version, we've got you covered in this sew along as well as the previous sew along for the original Stanton. As always, if you have any questions at all, please leave those down in the comments below. I am more than happy to answer any of those. As a reminder, the expansion pattern can only be obtained by becoming an all-access tiered member of the Cashmerette Club. I will leave a link to that down in the description below. However, the original Stanton pattern can be purchased as part of their regular collection on their website, But if you are an all access tiered member of their club, that Stanton pattern, original pattern, is included, so you don't need it extra. This is one of my TNT patterns, tried and true patterns. I absolutely love the Stanton. I've made so many different versions of it. It is my go-to sweatshirt pattern, and I hope you guys enjoy it as well. Until next time, happy sewing.